right now we've got my guy, Tom Curran from NBC Sports Boston. Two very important topics to get to with Tom. Tom, always great to see you. Great to talk with you. Let's start with the awards because you are one of the, I don't know, is it 50 or whatever, AP
50.
voters, 50 AP voters. When are the awards due? Like, when do you have to get your vote in?
The All Pro is due Monday at 5, and the awards are due Wednesday at 5. Different format for the awards this year, too, Ross, because we're voting kind of in a 1 through 5 points value, as opposed to just saying this is my player of the year, this is my MVP. Now it's staggered. I can vote for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for MVP. So there'll be a point system involved, which is an interesting way to do it. And I think it's a great way to do it.
I think it's a much better way to do it, don't you? Because, I mean, there might
100%.
be a guy that gets a bunch of second place votes or whatever, and other guys get some first place votes, but then other people don't think they're as good for a certain award. That's a more reasonable mathematical way to go about it.
Yeah. And I remember, we'll have the conversation forever about whether the quarterback should always be the MVP. I do tend to always err on the side of the quarterback because he handles the ball on every single play. He makes a decision. He holds the fortunes of the teams in his hand. He gets teams in and out of plays. He has to be the franchise hood ornament. So you have to be beyond exceptional to unseat a quarterback. But then you also, I guess the obvious is Christian McCaffrey versus Lamar Jackson, or even throw in CeeDee Lamb for the hell of it. Those three guys look to me, or Myles Garrett. You got four guys who could all be, you can make a case for each one in one way or another. So at least this way you get to throw it at each guy somehow.
Right. So if they asked you your opinion, would you want to wait till after the playoffs are over for these awards?
You know what? It's really an opportunity missed by the NFL to not have a playoff type MVP. Like, how they do an all tournament team in the NCAAs?
No, but I get, my point, Tom, is like, let's say you're torn on coach of the year between Kevin Stefanski and whoever wins the Texans-Colts game tomorrow night, right?
Yep.
Well, like if the Browns go to the Super Bowl, the AFC Championship game, it would be stupid if it was like Steichen was the coach of the year. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like
you're right.
The playoffs matter, and for defensive player of the year, and for it's. I think it's weird, and I understand why the vote is before the playoffs. But what we remember the most about a season is what happens in the playoffs. So to vote for the awards before the most important games happen, the games that we remember, it kind of skews things when we then think, wait a minute, that guy didn't win MVP or that guy wasn't Defensive Player of the Year. Micah Parsons had 7 sacks in those 2 playoff games, You're
100% right. And it's interesting because those are the games, like you'll look at, for instance, I've made the case that at least Julian Edelman should be spoken about in a Hall of Fame conversation. People go, he was never a Pro Bowler. He was never an All-Pro. And you're right. You're exactly right. And those are the standards by which Hall of Fame voting is done to a large extent. You don't even get there if you don't have those things. But he's the second all-time leading receiver in the playoffs. And the number of memorable plays that he's made in Super Bowls and AFC Championship games should make him a fabric of the history of the NFL. Again, I'm not making a Hall of Fame case for Julian Edelman, but at least a consideration, because those are the more important games than a December game between, the Titans and the Panthers. I mean, whatever. Somebody goes off in that game, big deal. You go off in February, that's a big deal.
So then my other question would be, like, let's say, for example, Defensive Player of the Year, okay?
Yes.
I don't think Myles Garrett's going to play on Sunday for the Browns against the Bengals. I do think Micah Parsons plays against the Commanders. So how will you factor it in if Micah Parsons has 3 sacks against the Commanders, but Garrett didn't play? I mean, is that a knock on Garrett? Does it only help Parsons? Like, how do you deviate between those two?
Yeah, that's funny because, like, would I do that with the Week 10 matchups and compare the teams that they were going against in that one and go back and compare week to week? Who do they go against? Who do they play? Or do I look at the body of work in games that mattered and say, okay, you have the best player on a defense that has carried a team to the playoffs and is already there. And I think that I would, again, I'm going to spend more time on it, but I would lean towards Myles Garrett in that sense. Now, you're a voter too, right?
No, I'm not.
Oh, I thought you were.
No,
I thought I'd seen
if
you on
I
that
was a
email.
voter, I wouldn't have brought you in. I would have just said all this stuff myself.
Good point by you. Good point by you.
No.
What would you do with your what would you do with your coach of the year vote? And
Oh, I think it's Kevin Stefanski.
should quarterbacks get the benefit of the doubt that we tend to give them as MVPs? I feel really strongly that you give 25% weight to playing that position.
Yeah, I think it's that valuable. I mean, and honestly, even like when you talk to like guys about betting in sports books, other players don't move the betting line, nearly as much as quarterbacks, which if we're talking value, if we're talking how many points they make a difference in the outcome of games, as great as McCaffrey is, it's just very difficult when you compare it to a quarterback. I have a question for you. What do they tell you guys about comeback player of the year? Because that is such a weird award. And it's like, well, I don't know. I guess Brock Purdy came back from elbow surgery and Joe Flacco came back from retirement or the couch. And, DeMar Hamlin came back from obviously that horrific, almost tragic incident. Like, I don't know how you're comparing these guys because it's like three different animals.
Yeah, it's completely, subjective. And with DeMar Hamlin, his contributions to the Bills been the same that Baker Mayfield's or Joe Flacco's were? Certainly not. Was his situation miles and miles and galaxies more dire than theirs? And the point to which he came back, he traveled a further road. Yeah, he definitely did. So are we talking about the impact made and the place that you started at as that's a breathtaking comeback, or production on the field? So there's no guidance given. It's a subjective measure. And I think that is just a great conversation point too, as to what would you use as a fan? Because there's no way to measure it. What would you use as a fan to measure the comeback? What would you say?
Well, I think you got to perform on the field. I think it's not just coming back from something. I think you have to then take it on. I mean, awards are supposed to be for accomplishments on the field, not just getting back. I feel like Hamlin's like in a different category.
I know.
You know what I mean? It makes it tough. We're talking with my buddy Tom Curran, NBC Sports Boston, and he's got a perfect backdrop, which lets you know that he's the host of the Patriots Talk podcast, which is awesome. Let's get into that, by the way, Tom. Here's my first question. On a daily basis, how many people ask you what's going to happen with Belichick? When you walk around, when you're anywhere in your life, you go to the mall. Do people still go to malls? Whatever. Wherever you go, when you're around family, how many times a day do you think someone asks you what's going to happen with Belichick?
I would say the percentage of people asking me in a setting in which the gym, Dunkin' Donuts, I would say it's really close to, it's a percentage, call it 70%. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with Bill?
So typically, do you go and get the donuts and coffee before you work out or after you work out?
That's going to be, it's just going to be a coffee first off. We're not going to go with the donuts. We're going to get the coffee early and we're going to work out later. But in the course of the conversation, I'll tell you what I say. They made a decision. Can Bill wriggle off the hook? Can Bill somehow be persuasive enough in a meeting at the end of the season for the Crafts to change their minds and say, you know what, let's run it back. Look, the circumstances don't lend themselves right now to us moving on, because Ross, that's the crux of it. As I reported, in mid-December, at that juncture, after they had come out of Germany, not because of the game in Germany and the loss to the Indianapolis Colts, but at that point, conversations I had indicated strongly that the Patriots were going to part ways with Bill at the end of the season, and a decision had been made. Has he done enough in the 5 weeks since to change it? Or as ownership scrutinizes the situation, do they say, are we setting ourselves up to be a better team next year? Is this what's good for the football team? And that's a question that I think they certainly have to answer before they make the ultimate decision on Bill and actually follow through with it. So you can make a decision. You and I can both decide to, jump off a cliff. But if we both get to that cliff, I go, Russ, it's pretty high. It's kind of windy. Do you want to come back tomorrow when it's less windy?
do you do you think he definitely wants to be back?
Every indication I've gotten from folks uh, reporting on it has indicated that he does.
Okay, because I didn't know if maybe he was ready to go to the Chargers or go somewhere else and try to win and break this record sooner.
Yeah, but the interesting thing, and I spoke to somebody on the staff yesterday. They said one of the most remarkable things about this has been Bill's consistency. He has shown not one inkling of drama. He hasn't blinked a bit. He hasn't mentioned it. The staff is completely in the dark. And given the Kraft family has not yet spoken with Bill Belichick, our buddy Mike Reese reporting that Monday is when the conversation will take place, Bill's in the dark. So as of this time, there's no conversation held, which to me, it seems really hard, Ross, doesn't it, to sit down on Monday and start trying to figure out how the best way to move forward is if you're going to keep Bill. You agree with me?
Absolutely. If they were going to keep him, they would already be talking about off-season plans and stuff like that. Let me ask you this, Tom. What would be his argument? Like, pretend I'm Robert Kraft and
Perfect.
you're Bill Belichick, and we sit down and I say, Bill, I think we're going to move on. Like, try to sell me on your Bill Belichick. Try to sell me on why I should keep you.
Perfect. Look, it's been one season. Okay. We were 8-9. I kind of thought we were heading in the right direction with Matt last year. You didn't. Mac Jones was playing well at the end of the year. But you wanted to switch at offensive coordinator, and I love Bill O'Brien. So I said, all right, let's make that switch. In the end, Mac regressed. We had injuries. We had Cole Strange out. We had Michael Wenu out. We had our right tackles who I signed in free agency. Neither of them were able to get on the field, period. So our offensive line was in disrepair. So we weren't able to protect Mac. And as a result, his decision-making really ended up being pretty bad. So we were victimized by injuries. But if you look, Robert, you look at our defensive side of the ball, we lost Matt Judon and Christian Gonzalez, our two best defenders. And we are one of the best teams in the league defensively. And if it wasn't for the turnovers and if it wasn't for the mistakes, we would be fine. Now we got a quarterback, heavy draft. We got a top 5 pick. We got $68 million worth of cap space. Don't you want somebody who's experienced at the point of the spear here, making these decisions? I can take care of this. There's circumstances that injected themselves into this year that made it this way. So don't talk to me about the Brady decision. Don't talk to me about the money that we spent in free agency 2 years ago. Don't talk to me about all the draft picks we've missed. Robert, you know and I know that I'm the greatest coach of all time, and I stand on that.
But Bill, it's not a one-year thing. It's been 3 out of the last 4 years, and you're the guy in charge of everything. So why would your backup quarterback be a guy that you were willing to cut and put on the practice squad in Bailey Zappi? You could have given yourself a better option there in case Mac Jones faltered.
Yeah, you got me on that one. Look at Joe Flacco. He's standing out there. He's minding his own business. We certainly could have brought him in August and not have to have suffered through Mac.
You know what's interesting, Tom, by the way? And I don't know how often you go on stations in other cities.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's most interesting to me, do you know that these other cities, they don't want him? Yeah, like, in other words, I've been on in D.C., and I said, I think there's a decent chance you guys get Belichick because I think Josh Harris will, he's a hedge fund guy. It's buying Belichick low, and it gives credibility. And he's like, we don't want him. I'm like, what do you mean? They estimated 10% of Washington football fans would want Belichick. Then I'm on in Charlotte, and I thought I can see Tepper doing that. Tepper needs some credibility. Tepper needs a guy like this. They don't want him down there either. And maybe it's just short attention span, and maybe if they hired him, Tom, they would feel differently. But I was blown away how many of these fan bases don't seem to want, like, it would not be a slam dunk, home run, people excited about a hire because of what happened this year.
I've said the same thing, beginning when the speculation was hot or began to warm up. I said, I don't know if people are going to be lining up for Bill Belichick, and people in our market said, you're crazy. There's definitely going to be people. And I've actually moved off of that stance, given after my report, how many people said teams will line up. But I think fans who say, I don't think I want that guy, are looking at the draft history, are looking at the offense and saying it's an offensive league and they're scoring 10 points a game. And the reason they're scoring 10 points a game isn't because of Bill O'Brien. And it's not totally because of Mac Jones. It's because of the totality of the decisions made on the offensive side of the ball. Jacoby Myers going off on another 70 catch season for 700 yards. And the Patriots said, no, we don't want him. Give us Juju. The guy's right in front of you and you don't want him. Tom Brady's right in front of you and you're trying to move him out the door and you finally get him out and he goes and wins a Super Bowl. So to me, Ross, you were here when the Patriots were an outstanding team. Bill's involvement with offense and his ability to cultivate offense has always been propped up, helped, aided by very able assistant coaches, whether it be your line coach here, Dante Scarnecchia, or the offensive coordinator. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road for Bill's next spot.
So there's a strong possibility, Tom. This is his last game there and last press conference. Will you miss him and his press conferences, or if you're being honest, will you be glad he's gone?
Oh no, I'll definitely miss him, Ross. Definitely. I mean, it's if it comes to pass, it's 24 years of covering the guy. I was here when he was here in 2000. We had a lot of good times in press conferences, a lot of laughs, even conversations on the phone and in person away from the stadium. So it's been a good relationship. It's just that's where the, being at cross purposes exists with being a media person who does analysis as well as information gathering. You have to analyze the direction of the team and opinionize on, well, why are they the way they are? So that is going to end up fracturing a relationship. If I keep saying Bill has run this team kind of into a ditch and it's smoking and you have to make a decision to move on. That's the job, to look at it objectively, but certainly what he has meant to this region, the success I've had in this business, and the number of times I've been on Dan Patrick is thanks in large part to the fact I covered a team that he was at the front of and helped to make as good as it was. So it's been helpful for me, obviously.
It's a really, really good point, Tom. Always great to talk with you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right, buddy. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Absolutely. There he is, Tom Curran, NBC Sports Boston.